Hello and welcome. In this episode, I'll be speaking about a growing media that I've never heard of before. If you're not sure what a growing media or medium is, let me throw out a few examples. Soil, perlite, coconut coir. So it's what you grow in, right? And we're all familiar with growing mediums. I believe the growing medium we'll be talking about today is human remains. This is the Cole Memo. I'm your host, Cole Preston. Every episode is released in audio, video, and transcript format. To find the transcript, audio, or video version of any episode, please refer to the description of the episode that you're listening to now. Within that description, you can find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. If you're unable to locate the episode description on whichever platform you're listening from, simply take note of the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. From there, you can use the search functionality in the top right-hand corner, and then you'll be able to access the audio, video, and transcript version of the episode that you're looking for. You might also find any links that we reference during the episode so that you might be able to do your own research. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, then you're listening to this episode a bit later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. It's a great way to support our show, and you get instant access to our episodes as they release for just $3 a month. I wanted to just thank our patrons for supporting me. You can also support me at thecolememo.com/support. That's where you can make a one-time monthly or yearly contribution of your choice. But I will say one of the best ways to support the show is absolutely free. Subscribe to or follow the show. Leave a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode. Give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment or share it with your best friend. Today is June 25th, 2024.
Okay.
So, Abby, I met you. I just got to give a shout out to, I think, somebody we both know, Dennis, from the Mycopreneur podcast. That's how we ultimately got connected. So, shout out to
Yeah.
Dennis.
Yeah, for sure.
And Abby, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, well, to me and my audience, since this is our first time chatting.
I'm Abby. I've been nursing for like 18 years, 20-ish with like school included. I am also a death doula, which is probably much more in my wheelhouse and lane now. And then I just sort of like to learn about things and do things and explore like everything that it is, out there. So I
Hell
just
yeah.
follow different interests.
Hell yeah. And I'm Googling it right now. Death doula. Is that somebody that guides you? Yeah, it looks like
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Kind of like
That's
a good like frame of reference is like a birthing doula. It's sort of like the non-medical aspects, natural, holistic, spiritual, whatever of birthing. It's kind of the same thing for the end of life.
very cool. That is wow, I bet that is quite the job because I mean, yeah, I don't know what frame of mind I'm going to be at the end of my life, but to know that somebody like you might be there to support, somebody like me, that's crazy to think. Crazy good, I should clarify.
Yeah. Like hopefully, I mean, it'll catch on. I did hospice nursing for a little bit, and that was just sort of, I thought that was going to be like my niche and my thing and nursing, and the sort of the chasm between like what I would want my death to look like and what we provide in like our medical establishment is it's very wide. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's
big
fitting. Oh, sorry. What'd you say?
as it was just a big learning curve there. Like it was really just like shine a light on how far we are from honestly where we used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I've never really thought about that. Like, so are you saying like what you mean by that is that like typically in our societies we would have a figure like you're describing and that maybe in the last like 100 years or so, maybe that's kind of fall out of tradition.
Yeah, no, it actually really sort of took like its solid form as it is today, like the death industrial complex
Yeah.
during the Civil War. Just because like, like soldiers from the north are going to the south and they're dying, and like the Protestant ethos of the time was that you had to see the dead body. It was, you need to. So they're, carting their dead soldiers up and down, on trains, and the conductor's like, no, no more rotting bodies on my corpse. So that's when like embalming came about. And they actually used like arsenic and sawdust predominantly like back then, which was okay, but they just like kind of stuff the, center parts of the body that really rot and then ship them off. But then like after the war's over, all these people are like, oh, well, I'm an embalmer now. This is what I do. This is how I make my money. So it was sort of that like shifting people into thinking that's what we need. And that's where sort of our fear of the dead body and fear of the dead and sort of this like the capitalist model of death really sort of took form. And, like America is like the big, the biggest like proponent of that. But like for all of time before that, we had death was a community thing, and we took care of our dead in our homes, and it was generally women that did these things and waking the body and cleansing the body and preparing it afterwards. And you go back, all the different cultures have different death rites, and we innately knew how to care for our dead, but now it's become a service that we're selling to you as if you didn't already know how to do this.
Yeah. And I was just about to ask you to kind of break down the death industrial complex, but you kind of just did there. Anything to add though?
Yeah. So like, I mean, it's now like we're really just selling our dead bodies back to each other. Like, oh, grandpa died. Now he's immediately unsafe. So you got to call in all these agencies and embalm the body. And then you have to stay away from it and keep it on ice. And you know what I mean? Like you have to put it in a $50,000. I mean, they're not always $50,000, but a super expensive steel, right, whatever casket, and then put it in the ground, and it just sort of like factors out into everything.
Yeah. And I don't want to I mean, if you'd like to add to this, I'm not saying you can't add to what I'm about to say. I just realized that what I'm about to say could be a podcast in and of itself. So maybe we keep it surface level, but I really think that as humans, we're almost getting in the way of our own deaths by throwing ourselves in caskets or tombs. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not a huge believer in what anybody has described as the afterlife. However, it's not that I don't believe things wouldn't go on if they could. And what I mean by that is it's widely acknowledged in science that energy is neither created nor destroyed. So like ideally if I died, I'd just like fall in a field and I'd decompose there. And I guess what I'm saying is I would live on, like other living beings would consume my energy because it's not lost. But I would live on in a way that I don't even know how to put into words right now. And I don't even think we would really perceive it the same way because it would be so many different life forms living off of us. But do you get I'm not even high yet, but do you get my kind of.
Yeah, no, I totally get, I mean, and that probably is like a whole, I could probably talk for days on end about that. But there's a lot of, I mean, you look at the like ancient Egyptian, like their burial practices, and they had all these certain things to continue for, the afterlife. And so one of my like favorite like rituals is the Tibetan sky burials.
Yes.
And like
please explain that before you.
Sure. So like and it's actually a felony in this country, so nobody go just do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. But so like what like in the Tibetan Buddhist ceremonies, they'll take the dead body and they'll put it on sacred land, like on a sacred mountain. And the ceremony is sort of watching like the vultures and birds of prey come down and they eat the body. So there's a couple of pieces to that. As one is it's sort of honoring that like transfer of that energy, that transmutation, and that return to the earth from which you came. But also, and like sort of one of my things that I love about it is if you're watching that ceremony, as you watch it, your response to that, to watching those birds eat eat your person or the dead or whatever, that really shows your own sort of feelings about death, which I think are super, like that's a super, like all these people that want to be like psychedelic guys or healers or whatever. It's being uncomfortable with someone else's discomfort. And you know what I mean? And that's really your own discomfort about it. And so I think that like, especially like as people are navigating, all these highs and lows and valleys and things, you have to have a certain level of being able to just sit with their discomfort and let them have their discomfort, and not try to take it. And it really just shows how you're going to show up for those times. So
Yeah.
it's
Damn.
super cool. I think it's super cool.
I think we're gonna have to podcast just about the afterlife sometime.
Yeah, I have studied, like, to study death in and of itself and the afterlife is really a study of consciousness,
Yeah.
and exploring that. And
Yes.
to me, if you sort of imagine or believe on any level, if you know that consciousness it's an energy form and it remains unbroken, then this is the dream. Does that make sense? Like, this is not the reality. If that's where you're going to spend, more time, all of eternity, then this is the dream. And so you wake up for this. So, like, I sort of view death more as like a graduation or a a return to, to wholeness or whatever, than, your death here. Yes, it's maybe the death of this physical body, but then it definitely goes, that energy that continues on. And there's a bunch of, like, the esoteric, the solar body and the light body and, like, all these different things about trans. And yeah, I think like, it's a Tibetan Buddhist meditation practice called Powa. It's like a death meditation, and it's essentially the practice of transference and transferring your consciousness. And it's sort of a tantric kind of thing where, like, it's knowing when and how, like, to channel your energies and when to, like, sort of transfer that consciousness into, like, something other than this physical existence.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
cool.
Dude, it is really cool. And I'm definitely gonna have to podcast with you about that because it sounds like just me being high, I was on to something that I didn't even know was already established. The idea that the study of the afterlife is the study of consciousness. Because that's kind of what I was saying. I was like, consciousness continues, but maybe not in a way that we can elaborate or even just, describe at this point, or even understand when we're experiencing it.
Right.
So
But I mean, I think there's ways to sort of touch that, like, quite a lot of ways to see. You just can get out of your body for a while. And the more you do it, the sort of more, like, and that's sort of the practice of meditation, I think, is getting, out of this physical and recognizing that you are more than your physical body. And just that sort of practice, the more you do it, and there's so many ways to get out of your body. Um, the more you do it, the more it just becomes sort of a known to you that this is not, a finite existence.
yeah. Yeah. Well, so for all those reasons, that's why I had to invite you on. If I could just cut to the chase, I heard some of what you were saying in Dennis's incubator. And if you recall, when you were done speaking, I was like, Abby, I have to have you on the podcast to talk about that. Like, I felt weird about like jumping in, but I was like, I needed you to know that, like, I need to hear more of it. And let me just try to recap of what I heard, and then I want to give you the floor so that you can correct me because I'll probably explain it a little bit wrong. Because not only am I high now, but I was high then. Um, you were describing using human remains as a growing medium.
Not necessarily. So, like, what, kind of doing, like, two paths with that. So, and like you, and it kind of speaks to, like, the return, to the earth from where you came, and that, like, sort of like cycling of the energy. Some of the new, more eco-friendly green body disposition options that are coming about are sort of amazing. And sort of, like, I'm, doing the death doula thing, and then, like, got kind of interested in, like, where, the whole psychedelics thing was going. And when I moved to Denver, I put up, when I got certified as a death doula, which I've been doing the work of that for 20 years. But one of the local funeral homes here kind of reached out, and they do, human composting. They call it, like, terramation. They do, and this particular one, they do, like, water cremation, green burials, and they also do, like, they work with other people and do fire cremations and stuff. But just so what you use with human composting is, alfalfa and wood chips and straw, which, if you watch Fantastic Fungi or something, you'll see, like, those are, like, preferred fungal, growing mediums. And so then like the sort of I really think if anybody hasn't watched the Midnight Gospel, 100% you should. But I think that was a lot of the inception a couple years, like maybe a year or so before I moved to Denver. I would watch that, and it's the last episode with his mom, and she lays down on a bed, and her she dies, and then these mushrooms spring up. And I was like, oh, and it just kind of all those pieces came together. And then to sort of experience like the ancestral transmission of knowledge, that sort of, I think our energy and our consciousness isn't just like our finite experiences here, but even like in our DNA, I think is included like is encoded the entire history of humans in the universe and everything. And that's really all just sort of information, which doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. But to grow mushrooms with sort of the composted remains of a person, I think you will see like a connection, like a reconnection, or that there was never a lack of connection between you and your person. And just sort of like you'll really, really understand. I think it connects you to see that this is, not the finite existence we think it is. They don't, they've done testing and they say there's actually no like human DNA in the compost. But for me, like I probably choose to believe this, but I feel like it's true, is that the essence of the person, I think, continues on in there. And then the water cremation, it's like you get like sort of two things from that, but you get a liquid, and it's like a liquid essence. And like the remains from one person can fertilize a 600-acre farm for a year. And so another like sort of piece of this was I was working in ICU, and some of the nurses I'd work with, TPN, it's like total parental nutrition. It's IV nutrition for people who can't take food, through their GI tract. But they would feed it to their plants, their succulents especially. And I was like, like the same things that feed us will nourish, our plants and the fungal kingdom and all these things. And sort of putting all these pieces together. And the, like human composting, terramation, it's really a carbon sequestration thing. Like you return 1,000 pounds of carbon to the earth for every person who's composted, which is huge. It's really the only like carbon negative, very like end of life disposition, because it's, where I think people get very like in the whole eco-friendly thing, they get kind of like, we just need to eliminate carbon, but we're carbon-based life forms. So it's having the right relationship to it. It's returning it to the earth. That's important. So that's why I love, human composting. And the green burials, the natural burials, just basically you can put your, be buried in an organic shroud or nothing, or sort of, we have like baskets made out of different woods, and you're essentially just put into the ground. And the whole process of that is kind of different too. Because you have like, when you don't put the whole big steel casket in, you actually just bury people at like 4 feet deep, not 6 feet, because that's where the bacteria and stuff actually lives in the soil to do the decomposition. So I think there's just so many different reasons why it's so amazing to do these things. And then I also want to, so I don't remember, it was like a year ago or so, but there's like indigenous cultures that will put, and hillbillies too, they put seeds in their mouths before they grow plants, and it's kind of like a roadmap for that plant or whatever it is you're growing, to provide you with optimal benefits. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking, like target your own medicine, use your own DNA. Like maybe you could grow some mushrooms with your blood or a hair sample or something, and then just sort of like really pour some fire, like ignite that, like those healing mechanisms that are in there, kind of like a do-it-yourself CRISPR kind of thing, like, you know what I mean, like gene editing and whatever,
Yeah.
but not necessarily a lab. So.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I didn't understand. Thank you for clarifying one probably important part, which is that maybe important to some, maybe not important to us. But still a point nonetheless that there was apparently no DNA in the compost. I didn't
Yeah, so
realize
it's
that.
like
I figured it
Soylent
was just like,
not yeah, like I get the like Soylent Green. If you might be too young for that, but like the Soylent Green is made of people. Like it's not you're
yeah.
not necessarily eating people. And I mean, if you get like we fertilize our food with manure,
Hmm.
that's for sure got stuff. You know what I mean? And I mean, they put farmland and buildings on top of ancient burial sites, so we have no idea. So I think, but there's a lot of sort of people get kind of grossed out by that idea, like, oh, you're going to eat people, but there's not actually any human DNA that remains in the compost. But I do believe it carries that sort of energetic signature of that person.
Yeah. And it's only one of the things I think you mentioned in the incubator with Dennis from the Micropreneur podcast. Another shout out for him was that it's only legal in certain states. Maybe certain forms of what'd you call it? Like different
The
methods of burial or something. There's a word
Yeah,
for it.
so the human composting specifically or terramation,
Yeah.
I think last year was 7 states, and now like this year already 5 more states have legalized it. I think Arizona, Maryland. I know those are two that have legalized it this year, but like Washington and Colorado, Oregon, those are some of the first. It's legal in New York, I think California, but in Arizona now I think it's super cool
And to be
idea.
clear, they just legalized these two forms of what are you even
It's
called? Like,
like human
what is it?
like terramation is sort of like the term, like the
Mhm.
industry term for human composting, and that's what they have sort of legalized in the funeral industry in the country is that particular form. I think green burials are probably a lot more widely available. But the thing is the only state in the country that you have to embalm a body is Alabama, and that's only if you want to transport the body across state lines.
You
So like as
have
long
to.
as you yeah, as
Gotcha.
long as you and that's just if you're transporting the body across state lines. So as long as you don't die in Alabama, you can already be composted. I A friend of mine that lives in Arizona, I had them like talk to the funeral home, and it's actually cheaper to do it's cheaper than most regular traditional funerals to do human composting and with transportation to like transport your body to the facilities in the states where it's legal and then return those things. It's still more economical than a traditional burial and stuff is, which speaks to the capitalist model of death. So there's aside from like maybe like I think the Catholic faith has a lot of like pushback for it. They think it's not respectful to the
Oh,
body. I respect that opinion, but mine is very different. I think it's of utmost respect to benefit the earth upon
yeah.
your exit from it. Um, but that's, I think like logically, there's not really reasons not to do these things. It's really just like your emotions about it, or what your sort of program thoughts about
Sure.
what end of life should be, that are like the only reasons not to do it.
Right. I'm curious, just because, I've seen it in the form of several different industries, like with the cannabis industry in Illinois, they've lobbied against things like home grow, which you'd think like if weed's legal, shouldn't you be able to grow it at home? And if weed's legal and you're licensed to sell it, shouldn't you be at the front of the line and arguing for those things? I've seen it take form in different industries though, like with hemp now. There's sort of like an interest from the alcohol industry to keep things the way they are or to make certain carve outs for them. And I guess what I'm asking is because this is an industry, the funeral
Mm-hmm.
industry, and do you like, I'm just curious since you're kind of tapped in, is there any like kind of lobbying? Like, what does that look like? Do you get kind of what I'm asking, first of all?
Yeah, no,
I'm having trouble asking it.
there's been some of the stronger pushback to these greener, newer options have been from like the grandfather funeral industry, that's developed over the
Right.
last 100 years because it sort of takes away from that. But
Hmm.
I look at like I was saying like earlier today, like if you look at all of these systems as organisms, right? An organism's primary goal is to survive. And in order to survive, an organism needs a food source. So in essence, like whatever that organism feeds off of, which would be whatever keeps that industry going, whatever feeds that industry is going to be what it's going to protect and what it's going to need. And
Right.
so you can kind of strip away like a whole conspiracy, like dark outlook, like, oh, the shape shifting reptilians are controlling this, and say, okay, no, like the funeral industry just wants to survive. So if we want to have the funeral industry survive, but also have these options available, what can we feed? What other alternatives food source can we give to this, or find some cooperation instead of competition between these systems?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing like our healthcare system is meant to keep you sick. A dating app is meant to keep you swiping because that's
Right.
what keeps those things going. But definitely, and it's funny that you're in Illinois. I think it was maybe a senator from Illinois with the whole like eating people thing, that there was like a senator or a congresswoman from, I'm pretty sure, Illinois, who had like a huge thing about that with the human composting. And it's actually not in Washington state. It's legal to grow things for human consumption with human compost remains. Everywhere else, it's not. They worry about heavy metals. But I think with sort of the realization of all the poisons that are everywhere, and just to keep yourself, clean and healthy as possible is probably the best way to do that. I don't think that will probably stay around forever. But it was, and also in Illinois, I think there was a big push. I think they sent a like cease and desist letter to a death doula, because they're trying to make death doulas in some places be like a certified, regulated thing by like a central governing body,
Yeah.
which will be entirely a money racket and a
Right.
false sense of security.
Hmm.
Like having been in, healthcare for 20 years, everybody I've worked with has been, licensed, credentialed, regulated, and we still have people that kill patients on purpose and do terrible things. So I think we've lost our own sense of agency and discernment for other things, and we let that go to those outside agencies, and then we think we need those things, and that's just that false sense of security is sometimes more dangerous than just figuring things out for yourself, I think.
Yeah. That's interesting. And yeah, I just did a little bit of Googling, and yeah, I'm seeing different results of human composting in Illinois. I'll just say, folks, look it up yourself. I'm not exactly sure where it stands today, but I am seeing at least this article. And what's funny is that since we were talking about cannabis, it was a bill sponsored by State Representative Kelly Cassidy. She was the lead sponsor on cannabis legalization. So um, as of this report, it was narrowly approved by the House, but whether it passed the Senate and got signed into law, I'm not sure yet. So that's what I want you to look up, folks. But to your point, look at this. In Illinois, the Catholic Church, among others, voiced its opposition, saying human composting does not afford enough dignity for the dead. U.S. Catholic bishops issued a statement. So yeah, to your point, sounds like that even happened in Illinois. Um, and I guess what I kind of, to clarify where I was coming from, I really appreciate how you approach that question, and just to kind of explain my side of it. Because I agree with you when you look at it the way you described it, where it's like people are just going to protect their interests. You're absolutely right. When I kind of brought up the kind of conspiracy aura, the smoke, if you will, um, what I was referring to is like, I've received, and this is just in the case of Illinois, like proof that some of these cannabis companies hired PR companies to like purposefully spread misinformation
Mhm.
about these hemp products. And that's where it's like, I wish they were engaging like in good faith and saying like, we just don't want you to get a license. But what they're going to say is, oh, the children, and they like make things up. So I was curious, like, is there anything like that from the funeral industry where it's like, you have Catholic bishops voicing their opposition because they don't think it affords enough dignity. But are there any like just look, like misinformation? Like, have you ever seen anything like that? Like, I don't mean to make it about just that, but I'm just curious. There's got to be some talking points that aren't made in good faith on these topics, you know?
I mean, I have seen, I think it was a site out of the UK, talking about, they were calling it terramation also, that just wasn't really spot on with a lot of the information. And I sort of come at everything with a bit of like skepticism now in the news and media. Like, okay, what's the real angle here? Like, where is this? And so it's just sort of circling back to that, like you're trusting yourself and your own discernment and being able to like, even think for yourself. But yeah, I think there's been some misinformation. I think that it's sort of like it's a very new thing. It's a very old thing, honestly, for us to return, our bodies to the earth and do these things. But it's a very new thing to allow to be legal, and it's like a whole new sort of sector of the funeral industry. So yeah, I think as it gets bigger and bigger, which I really think it will, I think there will be a lot more misinformation. I've actually seen quite a few death workers and death doulas talking about human composting and these things that are really don't have a lot of experience with it and really don't understand what it is and what it's doing. A lot, like I've talked to a bunch of people. I don't remember who if it was you or not, but there were a couple of sort of similar things that came out. Like the whole like people were talking about being a tree, and it was the capsula mundi, which was never actually a product. And what it was is they wanted to put people in these pods, kind of like in a fetal position, but they were is what the image was, but it was actually fire cremation ashes. And that's sort of one of my things is fire cremation ashes usually kill whatever you're trying to grow with them because they're not pH balanced. So if like you have a funeral, you have your ashes, your person's died, and now you want to have a memory tree, a memorial tree for them. Well, now your memorial tree is going to die too. You know what I mean? Because we don't sort of educate people. So that was sort of like a not in good fit. I think that was a good idea, and their hearts were maybe in the right place, but it wasn't actually how things work.
Mhm.
I think was so like one of the like I've used a lot of the compost in house plants and things like that. And another like the moisture content and the contents of these things are very different. So I had a couple of house plants get mold in them. You know what I mean? With just compost, which it kind of looks like mulch. So you're like, well, what's this gonna be? Um, so I think that's something that needs to be talked about, and that's kind of where I'm coming from with my thing is I want to like solidify and teach the process to where if you do want to use these mediums to grow cannabis or mushrooms or whatever it is, do it where you're not wasting, you know what I mean, like your person. Because and it takes a very little bit, like when you do human composting you get like 3 wheelbarrow fulls or a truck bed full of the compost. So it's a lot. And what we don't, what families don't want return, you can actually donate to conservation burial land, which is a whole nother thing and also amazing. And then I've also heard, so just like exactly how to do it. And so that, it is done with respect and intention and, a little bit of, maybe ceremony and gratitude. And then another thing I heard people talk about mushroom suits all the time. That actually wasn't too much of a thing either. I think it was a good idea, but they were basically doing like suits made like grown out of mycelium to then like grow stuff out of. That doesn't tend to work so good either. I don't think that was actually a thing. There's one cool thing, a guy in the Netherlands that I think I've mentioned this, but they have like the loop living cocoons, and that's we're not growing mushrooms in it, but it's made the coffin itself is made from mycelium, so it's the completely biodegraded in like 45 days
Right.
or something like that. Don't quote me, but that is pretty cool. But there's a lot of different things. Like mushrooms are amazing, and like the things that the mycelium can do, and I think that we just really are really starting to scratch the surface on all these things.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, mushrooms really are amazing, and I'm not just making a consumption joke. I mean, we just some of the things we know about them, and I'm looking to make sure that folks can find this. If you want to check out an episode, people that are listening, where I actually spoke to her name is Dr. Carla Gage. She's an assistant professor at Southern Illinois University, and one of the conversations we talk about is how mushrooms through their mycelial network can communicate with plants, and like they can help each other. Like if a plant is low on, like, I'm just going to throw out things that probably don't actually have any relevance here, but nitrogen and potassium, then the mushrooms can be like, yo, we got you on that. And vice versa. If the mushrooms are not doing great and the trees can supply. I've heard that we've observed that. So folks want to see that just really quick, thecolememo.com/guest index. Again, the interview with Dr. Carla Gage is the one you're going to want to check out, folks. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because anything to add, I guess? Because yeah, I obviously went for the easy mushrooms are amazing joke, but I underlined it with what I actually meant by that, which is like some of the crazy things. Any other things to add, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it is like, that's so amazing. Like the real science, like they are, they are at the beginning, at the end of life. They're there. The things that don't benefit us benefit them. You know what I mean? And so it's
Hmm.
such a wonderful symbiotic relationship. If we could, really is like sort of cultivate that relationship. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? I
nice.
think we could do some really, really cool things. But yeah, the science with it is amazing. And when you get, if you look at that, they can, the mycelium can, communicate with the trees and the other plants. And then also they make music. And if you really get into like, they're communicating with all these other things, I would think it'd be a natural, progression of thought that they could communicate with us. And do you know what I mean? And there's a show. Oh, what was that? I think it was on the Netflix. It's like the future of, like they're already doing studies with like encoding information into DNA and plants and all these different things, like a sort of storage of information. So it's the future is like, there's so much crazy possibility if they start looking at these things. And I think just if we understand what like our view of intelligence and consciousness both needs to shift, because that to me, that's a conscious thing, is that the fungal kingdom and the mycelium is helping the plants because they know they exist together. And that's to me like the natural intelligence that we need to sort of bring back and incorporate into our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, you got my mind going like a mycelial network, like all over the place, because yeah, it's just like it's so crazy to think about. One of the things I was thinking when you said, like, can they communicate with us? Like, obviously people can laugh at me for saying this, but I just can't help but wonder if, like, like me communicating with you, like some of the things you've said has made me feel a certain type of way. Maybe the same can be said the other way. And then I'm sure maybe even our listeners have had some aha moments. So like that's the result of just communication. And I'm just saying that when I consume mushrooms, sometimes I have a lot of aha moments. I feel certain types of ways. And I just can't help but wonder, is that communication? you know?
I don't know if you ever like seen Terrence McKenna. He's gonna be like, mushrooms are an ancient technology, a communication technology. Like, I mean, it's not; these aren't really new ideas. We're just recirculating them now. And I think, yeah, I think it definitely is like a form of communication, and it's part of the mycelial network. You know what I mean? I don't if you want to get into quantum physics and the non-locality of it, you don't even have to be like physically connected for those things to happen. So yeah, I think it's pretty much definitely for me a communication.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious, real quick, just a joke that I noted. I thought it was funny. I've never heard anybody say legalize it, especially in this context. So we can move past that. It's just, you know what I mean? Like usually legalize it is in the context of like drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, we actually have established the point that death is just, it's not the end of consciousness necessarily. So but I was trying to make a silly joke in terms of like, usually, yeah, when you think you're like legalize it, man, you're not like I don't even know what the mood would be. It would be like a solemn like I'm not even doing the pray thing, but for some reason I am legalize it. Like
Yeah.
it's a dignified way to yeah. Anyways, that joke didn't land. I can't even.
Sometimes,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
like I think, but it's kind of crazy. Like these things, it's almost like death is illegal for us. You know what I mean? It's as if our own exploring our own consciousness is illegal. And I think sort of death is at the core of that, I think of the same reason, you know, there's so much fear propagated with psychedelics. It's the same reason they try to scare you away from watching a total solar eclipse, which, if you've never, is absolutely the most amazing. That is the most psychedelic experience. It is so consciousness shifting in and of itself, just to witness a full total solar eclipse in totality. It's amazing. But death is the same way. And they keep us, those fears of those things and fears of shifting our perception keep us compliant. They keep us sort of, death to me, it's sort of what keeps you trapped in, you know, this matrix and worrying about all these like physical things and these physical problems that don't really matter. But it keeps that sort of, it keeps that organism going, because we are essentially the battery for this entire ecosystem, you know, the matrix, I guess, if you will. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I actually got the opportunity to see a complete solar eclipse this year. And like I drove down to like Kentucky or something for some reason. I don't know. Well, I say for some reason, it was the only place that I could find that was like 100, like definitely no visibility issues. There was like
Yeah.
a bunch of clouds that came in at the last second. And I come to find out the place that I was going to go to in Southern Illinois would have just been fine. But I'm still glad I went to where I was, because it was the skies were clear. It was actually in Missouri. I remember that because I remember being like, oh yeah, good. Weed is still legal, because I was smoking while I was watching
Yeah.
the eclipse. And yeah, you hit it right on the head. It was one of the most psychedelic experience I've had without, being on psychedelics per se. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, no,
cool.
I was like hardcore just to experience that, you know, sober by itself. And it was amazing. But I went to the Texas Eclipse Festival, and it
Nice.
was such an example of what happened. You've got, I think there were like 40 or 50,000 people there. And the day of the eclipse, like weeks before, they're like, nobody travel, there's no driving, you have to stay put on eclipse day. The morning of eclipse day, they canceled the entire festival, told everybody to leave, told them there's going to be huge, horrible things happening, and to vacate. So everybody starts scrambling, screaming. They're like packing up and trying to get out of there, ruining like the festival was canceled, and they're like gonna miss the. I think probably tons of people missed it.
Oh,
I was walking around. I was like, you guys, this is what they're doing. They're controlling you through fear, and nothing's gonna happen. Just chill out, and we'll have our own party here and watch it. Finally, people did, and just like I said, nothing bad happened. It rained the next day, but
yeah.
that is it. Like there was absolutely nothing. It was that sort of like governmental fear control tactic, and it was just
Wow.
such an amazing example of, they're like, oh, we're really afraid all these hippies are gonna, you know, sit here and watch the eclipse together, and some crazy stuff is gonna happen. So
Yeah, I could
yeah.
see myself being like, if like I almost getting lost in the shuffle, and if like somebody like you was there, is like, bro, just stay here. The eclipse is still gonna happen. I'd be like, good fucking point. Where am I?
Yep.
Like, I'm just gonna stay right here. Like, fuck them.
Yep.
You
Yeah,
know?
like Closey, I think was like the sunset performer that day. Like that was like, Closey's not here, but guess what? Like the real reason we came here should have been, if it wasn't, to witness this amazing spectacle of nature, this once in a lifetime thing, which was 4 minutes and 20 seconds long, by the way, which
Fuck
was,
yeah.
yeah. And I just laid there, and it was the coolest thing. Like the girl, ended up camping, like the girls next to me. I just go by myself, so I didn't know anybody, but the girls next to me, I had a couple of pouch couches, and they'd already packed everything up. I was like, here, throw it. Like, so I threw them out a pouch couch, and I sat on one. And like, we just laid there together. These girls I bonded with for a couple of days. The girl right beside me, like, as soon as totality started, she starts bursting into tears. She's just like weeping and insane. And I'm just like sitting there watching freaking plasma dance around the moon with my
Yeah.
naked eye. And I was like, that's probably, I think, like I'm already planning like possibly Iceland in 2026, and definitely Egypt in 2027 to go see more. That's probably the most addictive thing I've ever experienced is to see
Is
that.
yeah, I could see how you could quickly become an eclipse chaser after experiencing that.
Oh my God. No, like since then, so that was in April. And then, like, when the northern, like, with all the solar flares, the northern lights are going all crazy. So I was like,
Hmm.
Devil's Tower with the northern lights. So I went and did that. And then I was like, and then I think 2 nights ago, the full moon, we had a lunar standstill, which is sort of an optical illusion, but like based on the like patterns of the moon, it appears that the moon doesn't move. And so it's only 18 and a half years. I mean, I don't, it's like nobody's paying attention, but like the cosmos are going nuts right
Yeah,
now.
dude.
It's so crazy.
Well, I think it's unfortunate because, like, I don't know that this is an interesting conversation here because I've seen a lot of cities start to um, install the lights that what are they called, dark sky lights, so that they
Mhm.
don't pollute so they don't light pollute.
Yeah.
I fortunately live in a very remote area, but it's like you think about these people that live in cities, and like I love cities. I'm not talking shit about cities. I'm just saying you're missing out because of the light pollution. If you come out and see the stars, like sometimes it's crazy. I lived in a city for a while, and you forget like there's a whole other world out there like that, and it really I think helps with the perception of what's going on when you look up and not only see satellites, stars, and galaxies, but occasionally a plane full of people flying over. Like, who's in that plane?
Yeah.
What are they doing right
Yeah.
now? Where are they going? Like,
It's sort of,
it's
oh,
yeah,
I lived in Tucson for a while and I lived way out in the middle of the desert. So there's like nothing. It's skies. I mean, and all the crazy stuff happens in the desert. So
hmm
like just to sit out there and watch the skies at night, it's amazing. And if you look, like at the different constellations and the stories behind the constellations, the entirety of our human existence, all our stories are also written in the stars. You know what I mean? So if you go through that too, and then there, and you think about like we're changing, like humans and human history is changing, and also those stars are changing. There's new ones and they burn out. And it's just sort of crazy. It's like almost like it's our recorded history also. So
hmm
yeah, I definitely recommend stargazing.
yeah. And the last thing I'll say on this before I get us back to the topic before we close out is I heard somebody describe it. They went to like, I think it was a mountain in Hawaii or something that you can go to where there's like an observatory or something like that. And you can see the sky really well. And the way they described it was almost like it looked like a windshield. And then that's when they reminded themselves, like, we're just on a fucking rock shooting through space. It basically is our windshield. Like,
Yeah,
and when you
yeah,
think about it that way, it's like,
yeah. It totally is our windshield.
yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I love that so much.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
anyways, one of the things you said that I know that I can just Google, but since you mentioned it, I figure I might as well ask you. What is a green burial? I can't even say it. I'm guessing
Burial.
it's just another type of yeah, burial. Thank you. I don't know why I'd
Yeah,
say.
it's basically where you just like you wouldn't embalm the body because of the chemicals that can put into the earth, and
Gotcha.
you just bury them. It's a little bit more shallow of a grave because that's where,
Right, the 4 feet instead of the 6 feet.
yeah,
Yeah,
4 feet instead of the 6 feet. And you just
gotcha.
use, so like you kind of have your choice. We have some, they almost look like wicker baskets, but they're not exactly wicker baskets, but shaped like coffins that have,
Yeah.
lids. We have some that are just very shallow baskets on the bottom. And then you can also just be buried in a shroud. So, and it's kind of, there's a whole other level of like, just like a personal connection that happens. Like I've been able to help families lower their person, into the ground. So it's kind of amazing. And then they get to like in those situations, it's just a very different experience than our traditional burials and our traditional funerals are. It's so much more personal. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, when you watch someone's son like physically put them into the ground, or someone's wife put the first, bits of, dirt back over them, it's just a like really moving experience. So, but yeah, but green burial is basically just not embalming the body and putting organic biodegradable things with the body into the ground in a more shallow way. because I think it takes about 50 years for our like regular caskets and stuff to decompose.
Right.
And this can happen in like 2 months, if you do it
And this
without.
is, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Like, fine.
I was just gonna say, is this legal in all states, you said?
I'm not sure if all states, but I think, and it's kind of specific to, so like there will only be certain like cemeteries or burial plots that want to do it,
Sure.
just because of the different like regulations and things. I will say, I mean, if you want to bury grandma in your backyard, that can also be an option. Um, in some places, they just kind of call, I think the sheriff or somebody comes out with, then they mark the body with GPS on the system. So like if a dog, or some kind of other wildlife digs something up, nobody's gonna get in trouble for murder, but you just kind of let them know. But that is possible in some places, and there's actually some tax incentives to do that, that they don't want you to know about. So can talk about those later. But yeah,
Interesting.
there's so many. I think it just really all boils down to, we have so many more options than we think we do.
Yeah.
And I think that power, like that freedom of choice, is probably one of the most empowering things you can, when you realize that you really do have choices and you can really choose whatever you want, somehow. I think
Yeah.
that's a big.
I think what I maybe mixed up, thank you for clarifying though, that
Mhm.
yeah, we'll have to Google that, see if green burials are where they're legal at and such. But I think what I was mixing up is I didn't know what you said earlier, which is that you said Alabama or something was the only state where it's like required
To embalm the body.
embalm if you're
Yeah.
taking it out of state. I don't know why, but I was under the impression that like big what it's like you got big pharma. Do you call them big death? Like what do you call it? Anyways, the death industrial complex, as you said earlier, I was under the impression for some reason that like everywhere it was required to get embalmed. And I
No.
was like, that's so messed up. But that's I don't know where I heard that, but that I was under that
No.
impression.
Actually,
So I learned that today.
um, one of the like the Jewish, like their sort of customs are to not embalm a body.
Hmm,
So it's not, and it's for Alabama, it's only if you want to cross state lines that you're
gotcha.
actually required to do it. So yeah, embalming is, in my opinion, in no way, shape, or form necessary anywhere at any time. Just don't die in Alabama.
Yeah.
You
Don't
know,
well,
I
you
don't
won't
hang out there.
I was gonna say you won't find me dead in Alabama.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyways, well, hey, I really enjoyed my time with you today, and I know that there's much more we could have got into, so maybe that's an opportunity to reconnect. But I just wanted to thank you for your time today.
yeah. No, thanks. It was really fun.
Yeah, cool. I
Yeah.
was about to ask you, did you enjoy your time today? So
Oh, for
good to
sure.
hear.
I mean, I can talk about death and consciousness ad nauseum. Like I love it.
Can I ask you that before you go? If it's something you could put in a bottle, what got you fascinated in this topic? Maybe that's a good note to end on.
Well, I did have my own like near death experience when I was like 19. And I don't think it really like solidified at the time. And then I have just sort of, and then like becoming a nurse, I wanted to be like the flight nurse and the trauma nurse that saved everybody, and I did that. But then it was like pointed out to me from other people, like, you're really like with the end of life, like really good with that. And I think just sort of I've explored pretty much any altered state of consciousness that you can think of. I've explored that, whether advertently, like whether it was on purpose or not. And so, like, I mean, I've always been kind of, I would have, and I didn't, know what was happening when I'm a kid, or 10 years ago, before at least lucid dreaming and stuff was cool. But I would, I was a lucid dreamer. I would like spontaneously have like astral projection. So like I studied a bunch of that, and just different, all kinds of different things, just trying to figure out where we really are. Like, are we just in this meat suit? Because this didn't really always feel like home. You know what I mean? So yeah, I just sort of probably like the near death experience and experiencing all the different kinds of altered states really just gives me like sort of like a like just like a knowing, like this is not it. This is not all there is.
Yeah. Well, um, Yeah, on that note, I keep having cheesy segues, but that's not all there is to this conversation. I hope to sit back down with you, Abby,
That
to
one
talk more.
landed, Cole. That was good.
Good deal. Good deal. That
Yeah.
hey, all right. I feel good closing out
All
this
right,
podcast
cool.
now. So, all
Well,
right. Well,
thanks for chatting.
yeah, thank you. And I guess I usually ask, and I can make sure to add it to the show notes, but do you want people to connect with you online? Do you have like a website or anything you want to plug? Or if
I
not, it's
mean, I'm
okay.
on LinkedIn all the time, so like you
Cool.
can just find me on there. And then I'm working on, as I get my materials and processes finished, I'll work on websites and things like that. So, but yeah,
Rock on. Rock
cool.
on. All right. Well, folks, I hope you found as much value in this conversation as I did. We'll see you on the next episode of the Cole Memo. Abby, take care.
Bye, Cole.